Brian and Michael, known for their scary urban explorations, entered an abandoned Alabama asylum. Their sincerity as explorers made the chilling encounter they filmed that night all the more unsettling and made viewers question what truly watched them. In 2016, they arrived at the Jemison Center in Northport, also known as Old Bryce Hospital, a decaying psychiatric institution with a long and troubled history. From 1939 until its closure in the late 1970s, its halls confined hundreds of patients under conditions spoken of with unease. The building now stood hollow, claimed by vines, shadows, and time itself. Yet its reputation lingered as one of the most unsettling places in the state. The two explorers circled the grounds by car, headlights sweeping across broken brick and windows that looked less like openings and more like watching eyes. The area appeared deserted, yet silence itself seemed to follow them as they stepped out and began their exploration. They descended first into the basement, a maze of rotting wood and dripping pipes where graffiti bled across the walls. The air smelled of mold and earth, heavy with the kind of stillness that made every footstep sound louder than it should. They pressed upward to the top floors, climbing a staircase that trembled under their weight. The danger of collapse was clear, though soon it became evident that crumbling stone was not the greatest threat. A flicker of movement caught their eyes, a glimmer of light on the opposite staircase. Someone was there, holding a lantern or flashlight, their outline sharp against the broken frame of a window. The figure remained silent. When Brian and Michael dimmed their own lights, the stranger did the same, an action far too deliberate to be dismissed as chance. For a moment, both sides stood locked in wordless acknowledgement, one watching the other through the fractured shell of the hospital. When they replayed the footage later, the light was already visible, faint but present, long before they reached the upper floor. Whoever it was had been waiting, patient in the dark. No cars had been seen on arrival or departure, meaning the presence had arrived on foot, moving with them among the ruins. With no response to their cautious calls, the explorers returned to their car, the building looming behind them like a hollow chest filled with hidden breath. The watcher never revealed their intent, and the silence of Old Bryce remained unbroken. However, what happened to Chris Hill was far beyond explanation. When Chris Hill explored the long-abandoned Paul R. Elementary School, silence clung to every wall. What he uncovered inside felt older than decay itself. Did something remain among the ruins? The corridors of Paul R. Elementary School had been silent for nearly a decade, yet when Chris Hill stepped inside, the silence did not feel empty. It carried weight, as if the air itself remembered the voices of children that once filled these walls. The bottom floors lay submerged in stagnant water, hallways sagged beneath years of rot, and scattered books softened under mildew, their pages curling like withered leaves. Chris had explored forgotten asylums and deserted military grounds, yet the school carried an oppressive stillness that clung to his skin. Chalk messages appeared on cracked whiteboards, some fresh enough to suggest a recent hand. He walked carefully, knowing he was not entirely alone. The thought of who else might linger unsettled him more than the decay. A faint rustle stirred somewhere in the distance, followed by the sweep of a light across the hallway. Another presence, quiet but deliberate, moved through the darkened building. Chris kept to the shadows, resisting the urge to call out. The night felt fragile, as if sound itself could break it open. He slipped away toward the upper floors, trying to keep his breathing even. Inside the top-floor bathroom, unease turned physical. At the far end stood a human figure, motionless and dark against the dim light. Chris froze, every nerve tightening. He raised his light only to find it was no man at all but a mannequin, planted there with cruel intent. As if mocking his fear, the figure tipped forward just as he entered, hitting the ground with hollow force. He steadied himself, shaken but not broken, and pressed deeper into the maze of classrooms. He also heard strange noises continuously. However, the building seemed to grow more alive the higher he climbed. Shadows shifted behind door frames, and a low howl carried through the halls. Not mechanical, not natural. A fleeting silhouette slipped past the edge of his camera, too fluid to be a trick of light. By then, it no longer felt like chance encounters with squatters. Something unseen trailed his movements, always just beyond reach. On the stairwell, the final sound arrived. Footsteps echoed above him, steady and deliberate, pressing down with each creak of the wood. He called out, voice sharp against the emptiness, yet no answer came. The weight of those steps remained until he forced his way outside into the night air, leaving the school to its silence once again. Next up, she fled that house, but some hauntings arrive uninvited. Kyle Anthony found that out at his own door. A woman returned again and again to clean a house abandoned by every tenant. The realtor gave no explanation, only keys. What force within those walls kept driving people away? The woman had cleaned many homes in her line of work, yet this one drew her back again and again, as though the house itself demanded her presence. The realtor explained it simply: tenants never stayed. They signed their leases, moved in with good intentions, then left within weeks, refusing to speak of the reasons. He offered no further detail, only asked her to prepare the property once more for the next set of hopeful residents. One winter evening, she arrived alone, the last tenants already gone, their belongings stripped away, leaving only bare walls and silence. The air felt colder than the night outside, heavy with a stillness that pressed against her skin. She moved through the narrow halls with her supplies in hand, her footsteps muffled against the wooden floor. As she passed one of the side rooms, the sound of movement stirred the quiet. A door creaked open, slow and deliberate, though no one was near it. The hinges groaned as the gap widened, revealing nothing but darkness beyond. She froze. Her breath caught in her chest before forcing herself to continue. Yet the house seemed aware of her hesitation, each step forward thick with unease. Approaching a larger room at the end of the hall, she raised her light. In the far corner, just beyond reach of the glow, something shifted. The shape resembled a human form, tall yet indistinct, a gathering of shadow that held its place as if waiting. Her pulse quickened. She did not step inside. Instead, she lingered at the threshold, watching the figure remain motionless, its presence silent yet undeniable. Her instincts urged her to leave, but the house was not finished with her. As she turned back towards the hall, another door opened before her eyes. The sound filled the air like a sigh, wood sliding against wood. The timing was deliberate, too precise to dismiss. Fear became heavier than reason. She fled, her hurried footsteps echoing through the corridors, until she reached the front door. The air outside met her, like a release, sharp and cold, carrying her away from the suffocating weight of the house. Only then did she understand why no one remained within those walls for long. The house itself seemed unwilling to share its space with the living, driving them away one by one, and it would continue until left in silence once more. But if that scared you, nothing can compare to what happened in the next one. The house forced every tenant to leave. Yet some places do not wait for you to enter. Kyle Anthony learned this when his doorbell rang at 4:30 a.m., 3 times. Each time he opened the door, no one was there. Who kept calling in the silence? Each ring cut through the silence with sharp finality, yet every time he opened the door, the porch stood empty. He waited, trying to reason with himself. Perhaps a fault in the wiring, perhaps some trick of weather. Yet as soon as he settled back, the bell echoed again, loud and deliberate, as though an unseen hand pressed against the button. Kyle stepped out, camera in hand, sweeping across the yard. No movement stirred, no shadow passed across the lawn, only the pale wash of streetlights and the faint stir of wind through branches. The button itself looked untouched, its surface still and clean. Back inside, the bell rang once more. The sound carried through the walls, too sharp and too intentional to be a malfunction. His voice faltered as he spoke into the recording, caught between disbelief and fear. What Kyle discovered in his attic was far worse. Kyle Anthony's home grew restless with rattling doors, strange knocks, and flickering lights. When he searched the attic, he uncovered a hidden journal that hinted at a story far darker. What secrets lay inside? Kyle Anthony never expected that a routine day in his home would lead him into the middle of a mystery. It started with small disturbances, things he could not easily explain. Tucked away among forgotten boxes sat a faded doll with empty sockets where its eyes should have been. Weeks later, he discovered the glass eyes hidden separately in the crawl space, as though someone had gone out of their way to remove and conceal them. Alongside these objects was a journal. Its cover was worn, its pages filled not with words but with rows of numbers that begged to be decoded. Kyle began the slow process of translating them, discovering that each number represented a letter. Bit by bit, a story began to emerge. It seemed to belong to a man who had once lived in the same house, a man whose wife left and took their child, leaving behind bitterness carved into code. One sequence stood out: 1117. Kyle turned it over repeatedly, trying to force meaning from it until he chose to move on. What followed was more revealing. The numbers translated into an address. When he searched it on Google Maps, an image appeared: an aging farmhouse 45 minutes away, isolated and worn down by time. The thought of it pulled at him, stirring a mix of dread and curiosity. Standing in his home, journal in hand, Kyle could not shake the question. Was the farmhouse the missing piece to the disturbances that plagued him? Or was it a door better left unopened? If these chills left you looking over your shoulder, then keep the fear alive. Subscribe for more. Drop a like to show your courage, and share with friends who dare to watch in the dark.